day was warm, the kind of pleasant late spring afternoon, when the breeze carried just enough coolness to make sitting outside feel perfect. My pride and joy, a handcrafted porch swing, hung gently from the beams of my front porch. I'd built it myself after weeks of sanding, staining, and adjusting every bolt until it felt as solid as a tree trunk. The swing wasn't just a piece of furniture. It was a symbol of patience, craft, and a touch of nostalgia. I didn't expect it to stir up trouble, but that's exactly what happened when Karen, my new next-door neighbor, spotted it. Karen was known around the neighborhood for having an opinion about everything. From grass height to mailbox colors, she had always found ways to nitpick. Most neighbors avoided confrontation by quietly giving in. But I had spent countless evenings on that swing, reading or sipping sweet tea. I wasn't about to let anyone dictate what hung on my porch. It started with a knock, a sharp, rapid-fire rhythm that made me sigh before I even opened the door. "There you are," Karen said, arms crossed, eyes narrowing as though I'd committed some unspeakable crime. "That swing, it has to go." I blinked, caught off guard. "Excuse me?" "It's unsafe," she said firmly, pointing toward the swing as though it might leap forward and attack someone. "Those chains could snap. It's a liability for the whole neighborhood. I know you think it's quaint, but it's an accident waiting to happen." I tried not to laugh. "Karen, I built that swing myself. It's reinforced and tested, safer than most of the furniture in this block." But she didn't budge. "No, remove it, or I'll have to report it to the HOA. Now, the irony here was thick enough to cut with a knife. Her father, a well-known carpenter in our town, had once been praised for his craftsmanship. In fact, many homes on this street still had doors and staircases he'd built decades ago. If Karen really doubted my skills, she was, in a way, doubting the man she was so proud of. Still, I stayed calm. "Karen, I appreciate your concern, but this is my porch. The swing stays." Her lips pressed into a thin line, her nostrils flaring. "Fine, don't say I didn't warn you." She spun on her heel and marched off, already plotting her next move. I leaned back against the doorframe, watching her go. I had no idea just how far she'd push this ridiculous battle, or how her own family ties would come back to bite her. The following week, I noticed a strange tension settling over the neighborhood. It wasn't hard to guess why. Karen's disapproval of my porch swing had already made the rounds, spreading like wildfire through whispered gossip at mailboxes and dog walks. By Tuesday, I had a letter tucked into my mailbox, stamped with the seal of the Homeowners Association. The message was direct. "We have received a complaint about a potentially unsafe structure on your property. Please address this matter promptly, or a formal hearing will be scheduled." I almost laughed aloud. Unsafe? That swing was bolted into, reinforced beams, and tested with more weight than a small car could carry. If anything, it was the most secure thing in my house. But Karen wasn't one to play fair. I could already picture her standing at the last HOA meeting, speaking dramatically about the danger of my swing, probably predicting lawsuits, concussions, and broken bones. That evening, I decided to invite a few of my closer neighbors to see for themselves. They sat on the swing one by one, rocking gently while sipping lemonade. Each person gave me the same response. "This thing's built like a fortress." They chuckled about Karen's dramatics, but warned me she wouldn't let the issue drop. And they were right. A week later, the HOA chair, Mrs. Dalton, arrived at my door. She was a kindly woman most of the time, but when she held a clipboard, she turned into a rulebook on legs. "Now," she began, adjusting her glasses, "we've had multiple complaints. Karen insists your porch swing is not only unsafe, but also unsightly and against community aesthetic." I raised a brow. Unsightly? Half the neighborhood still has peeling shutters, and Karen herself leaves trash cans in front of her garage for days. Mrs. Dalton sighed, clearly weary of being dragged into another of Karen's crusades. "Look, I personally don't see an issue, but the rules say we have to investigate. Would you be open to a formal inspection?" "Of course," I said confidently. "Bring whoever you like. I'll even show you the schematics I drew up before building it." Word must have traveled quickly, because within hours, Karen showed up again. She stood at the edge of my porch, glaring at me with the triumph of someone who thought she'd already won. "You'll see," she said smugly. "They'll order you to take it down. I'll finally be rid of that eyesore." I gave her a calm smile. "Karen, let them inspect. I have nothing to hide." What I didn't know then was that the person they'd bring for the inspection would strike Karen harder than anything I could ever say. The day of the inspection arrived with more drama than a soap opera. By noon, a small crowd of neighbors had gathered discreetly on sidewalks, pretending to trim hedges or walk dogs while keeping their eyes glued to my porch. Everyone knew Karen had pushed the HOA into this, and they wanted front-row seats for the outcome. Mrs. Dalton showed up first, clipboard in hand, followed by 2 other HOA board members. But the real surprise came when a tall, broad-shouldered man stepped out of a pickup truck behind them, toolbox in hand. I nearly chuckled when I saw him. It was Mr. Whitaker, Karen's father. He'd been a respected carpenter in our town for decades, known for building everything from spiral staircases to rocking chairs that lasted generations. Even though his hair had thinned and his hands bore the marks of years with wood and tools, his reputation hadn't faded. Karen, however, went pale the moment she recognized him. "Dad!" she sputtered. "What are you doing here?" Mrs. Dalton looked between them. The HOA decided to bring in an independent expert to assess the safety of the swing. "Your father kindly volunteered." The crowd rippled with muffled laughter. Even I had to bite back a grin. Karen had, without realizing it, summoned the one man most qualified to prove her wrong. Mr. Whitaker approached the porch, ignoring Karen's flustered attempts to intervene. He gave the swing a long, practiced look, tugging gently at the chains, inspecting the bolts, and tapping the beams with a small mallet. His hands moved with a craftsman's precision, checking details that most people wouldn't even notice. Finally, he sat down on the swing himself. The crowd hushed. At his age, he wasn't light, but the swing didn't so much as creak. He rocked back and forth, nodding approvingly. After a long pause, he stood up and faced the HOA. "This is fine work," he declared, voice steady. "The beams are solid, the chains reinforced, and the craftsmanship, well, I'd say it's as good as anything I've built. There is absolutely nothing unsafe about this swing." Karen's face turned a deep shade of crimson. But Dad, it's ugly. It doesn't fit the neighborhood." Her father turned toward her, eyes narrowing. "Ugly? Karen, this is quality craftsmanship. You wouldn't know that, because you've never lifted a hammer in your life." His tone carried both disappointment and finality. The neighbors chuckled openly now, and Karen's indignation melted into stunned silence. For once, she had no comeback. Mrs. Dalton scribbled something on her clipboard, looking relieved. "Well, that settles it. No violation here." Karen's plan had backfired spectacularly, and though I wanted to let the victory sink in, I sensed the battle wasn't quite over. Karen wasn't one to admit defeat so easily. After the inspection, the neighborhood practically buzzed with the story. Karen had pushed so hard to get my swing removed, only for her own father to stand on my porch and praise it. For days afterward, whenever she stepped outside, neighbors gave her knowing smiles or, in some cases, couldn't resist a chuckle. But Karen wasn't finished, not entirely. She came storming over the next evening, her frustration written all over her face. "You think this is funny, don't you?" she snapped. I leaned back in the swing, gently rocking. "Honestly? A little. Your dad gave me the highest compliment I could ask for." She groaned, throwing her hands up. "He's biased. He's a carpenter. Of course he'd defend something like this." "But the HOA—" "The HOA cleared me," I reminded her calmly. "It's over." Karen glared at the swing like it had personally insulted her. "Fine, keep it. But don't come crying to me when it breaks and you get sued." I smiled, unbothered. "Karen, if this swing breaks, I'll invite you to the party celebrating it. Until then, I think I'll enjoy it." She huffed, spun on her heel, and stomped back to her house. For once, she didn't have the last word. The days that followed turned into something of a small victory tour. Neighbors stopped by more often, curious to try the famous swing themselves. I welcomed them with cold drinks, watching them laugh as they gently rocked back and forth. It became a neighborhood fixture, a quiet reminder that sometimes stubbornness and craftsmanship could stand up to pettiness. The best moment came a week later, when Mr. Whitaker himself returned. He knocked politely, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "Mind if I sit?" he asked. "Of course not," I said, moving aside. He lowered himself onto the swing with ease, and together we sat in silence for a while, listening to the creak of chains and the rustle of leaves. "You did good work here," he finally said, nodding. "Reminds me of the swings I used to build." Karen. "Well, she doesn't always think before she speaks, but maybe this will teach her a thing or two about respect." I chuckled. "I doubt it, but I'll take the win." He gave me a knowing look. Sometimes the best way to win is to let the work speak for itself. And as we sat there, two craftsmen from different generations enjoying the same simple creation, I realized that the porch swing wasn't just a piece of wood and chain. It was a statement, a reminder that not everything needed to be torn down just because one person didn't like it. Karen might never admit defeat, but I didn't need her to. My swing, her father's praise, and the laughter of neighbors were victory enough. Enjoying this wild neighborhood drama about Karen and the porch swing her own Carpenter dad ended up defending? Tap that subscribe button for more real-life inspired stories with a twist. If this tale made you smile, give it a like and drop a comment below. What would you have said to Karen if she demanded you take down your swing?